Good afternoon, everybody, and I'm really delighted to be here today. It's a very momentous occasion indeed, and I'd like to speak to you about Generation Y. As Dermot said, I currently work as the Head of Talent Development for Deloitte here in Ireland, and 80% of our employees are under 35 years of age. 80%. So it started to fascinate me. I was doing a lot of career profiling work when I joined the firm 6 years ago. And what I started noticing was these young employees were scoring really high on pure challenge. So they wanted really challenging roles, but they were equally scoring high on work-life balance. And they're quite uncomfortable bedfellows, actually. You know, you want really challenging career, but yet you want to have a very good balance in your life. So it sparked an interest in me, and I went on to do my doctoral research in this area, where where over 500 of this population participated in my study. So it was a range of surveys, focus groups, and quite a number of in-depth interviews. So I just wanted to give you a whirlwind tour really of my research and an insight into this generation. This is the cover of Time magazine from earlier this summer, and it's the me generation. Millennials are lazy, entitled narcissists who still live with their parents, and why they'll save us all. And I think this really encompasses a lot of some of the trends I'm going to discuss with you today. There has been a real surge of interest in this area, and I'm delighted Dermot is interested anyway, hopefully the rest of you are also, because Generation Y are an ever-increasing part of our workforce, and we need to look at how can we get this generation engaged and performing at a really high level, and really enjoying their work also. So just to take a step back and have a look at the intergenerational workforce, which I presume most of us in this room are a part of. So we have the baby boomers. Again, 87% of CEOs currently are in this cohort. And baby boomers would value tradition, tenure is very important, status. The job for life would be a key aspect of the baby boomer employee. Then we look at Generation X, and typically Generation X, very competitive. We're noticing a lot of trends in the research around ambition. If you think back to the whole yuppie era, Generation X would have been a part of that. And a very sad trend, I think, the concept of the latchkey kids. And hands up, I am part of Generation X. I won't ask you to identify what quadrant you're all in. Clearly, most of you were born post-1980, so, but Generation X, I suppose when you think about the parenting, and I'll come back to this in a moment, but they were brought up in, you know, that long hours culture, often having to fend for themselves, and typically now they're quite an independent cohort in the workplace. And then we come to Generation Y, who, and this is not to stereotype, but there are very consistent trends we're seeing in the research around the different generations. Obviously not everybody is going to fit into the trends, but Generation Y are quite a fascinating group, and I'll talk a little bit more about the trends we've noticed in a moment. Generation Z are really, they're in their early teens at the moment. We haven't seen obviously what they're like in the workplace. One thing we are noticing, and there's a lot of current research around how they're going to behave socially, because they are very reliant on technology, and that's going to be an ever-increasing area of research. So when we look at this Generation Y population, they are typically, Martin has done a lot of research in this area, and the research varies, but it's roughly born between 1978 and 80. Up to 1998. So they're broadly that 20-somethings cohort in the workplace at the moment. They're described as independent entrepreneurial thinkers who relish responsibility, thrive on challenge, love freedom, and hate micromanagement. Some of their defining moments, quite timely when we think of the week that's in it, but the 9/11 attacks had a profound impact. The emerging economies, globalization, very socially responsible cohort. They're digital natives. Us Gen Xers in the room, we're digital immigrants. During our lifetime, technology, do you remember the days when there was no mobile phones, for example? How did we survive? Whereas these guys, they're the Google generation. Everything is instant. So how has that impacted them? I just picked a few sound bites, and I thought some of these were quite interesting. If you want to just have a quick read. If we don't like a job, we quit, because the worst thing that can happen is that we move back home and there's no stigma. I took her to Montessori and now I'm here for her first day of work. We have never had more calls from parents to the HR department in my organisation. Parents ring us regularly. My daughter's working far too many hours. And or we have people ringing, coming to interviews with their children. It's quite amazing. It is quite amazing the amount of parental involvement we find in the workplace. I want to do good work, not just slog through the years till I get my Persian rug and my 50-gallon fish tank. So, interestingly, I know Kieran's going to speak to us about values, and I'm very interested in that presentation. What we've noticed about Generation Y, they're connected 24/7, very self-confident, very optimistic, bored by routine. They're the most educated generation we have in the workplace. They're very lifestyle centred. So work is just one aspect of their life, and they're not willing to give up their life for work. It's interesting, I work in a partnership environment where the goal was always to become a partner. And now for the first time, I'm having very bright, ambitious guys and girls saying to me, you know what? It doesn't appeal to me. I don't want it. I want to have a life. I don't want to be on 24/7. I don't want the risk that's associated. Fine, you get the big bucks, but it doesn't align with my values. Very socially conscious, as I said. I was doing a graduate interview recently and I was asked, what do Deloitte do for the green agenda? Felt like I was being interviewed. So, it's very socially conscious and entrepreneurial. I want feedback and I want it now, often referred to as the now generation, particularly in terms of promotion. The concept of tenure and earning your stripes, that self-confidence has given a sense of entitlement. So why can't I be promoted to manager? I've been here 3 years. For the parents in the room, a key element when we talk about Generation Y and what has developed a lot of the behaviours, the helicopter parenting. So parents tend to hover over their offspring, intense involvement in the child's development. You're wonderful, you can be whatever you want. And I have an admission to make. It's quite an important day in our house. At 2:05 p.m. this afternoon, just before I left, my 11-month-old son took his first steps, and and of course I got the camcorder out, and in his book everything was being noted, and I just had to, catch myself saying, I really am doing the helicopter parenting piece, and you're wonderful, you can be whatever you want. And that has instilled an immense sense of self-confidence, which is very positive, but in the workplace we're also seeing some of the implications of that. This is just an ad from a European law firm, which I thought really captured a lot of what the promotion around trying to attract this generation. Why wait? Responsibility from the word go. Briefly, Grattan from London Business School, Linda Grattan, has done quite a lot of research, and this is quite recent, and I thought it was interesting. The paradoxes. So Generation Y have a short-term focus, but they're equally committed. It's not that they don't want to work hard, but they will challenge how we work. Do we need to work Monday to Friday? If I want to log on with my laptop at midnight and work till 3 a.m., what's the problem with that? Tech savvy, but value the face-to-face. So clearly, technology is really critical for them, but it augments the face-to-face communication. And particularly when we talk about career coaching, mentoring, performance conversations, feedback, they really want the face-to-face time. Time magazine have dubbed the generation the trophy generation, but that's not necessarily true. Generation Y do want recognition, but it has to be meaningful. It has to be meaningful. Thank you, Dermot, for the plug for the book. And again, I can't go into this in any detail, but my doctoral research will be published hopefully next month. And I go in detail to this framework I've developed around how to really engage and motivate this population for peak performance. And I've touched on some of this already: meaning and purpose in their work, challenge, timely, honest communication, interest in personal career path. And just to share with you, one of my interviewees, a very bright, ambitious young female engineer, had told me that she'd recently been to a conference in London and her line manager had invited her along. And that meant so much to her. She said the fact that her manager felt she could get a lot of value from this conference, and it actually impacted her career progression, and she decided to stay with that organisation. I interviewed her in 2009, and she contacted me last month to say she had just been appointed as a senior manager to that engineering organisation. Values and vision, critical. Attentive management, and that is spending the time with the individuals. Terms and conditions are important. This generation need to feel they're being paid fairly for the work they do. And energy management refers to the work-life blending, as we now read about it. So just to pick on a few, 2 minutes, great. Just to pick on a few practical strategies which perhaps you can consider in your own workplaces. Generation Y tend to have a lot of challenges with Generation X in the workplace, even though they're closest in age. But that sort of Generation X will often look at the Yers and say, gosh, they're so lazy, or they're not really, there's no work ethic there. So there is a lot of conflict. Generation Y tend to prefer the baby boomers as their mentors, but they really value that peer-to-peer collaboration in the workplace. They want a fun workplace, so good luck with that. If you have budgets where you can have slides, and this is obviously Google, but that sense of how can you create fun and a social environment. In my own workplace, in my own research, it was interesting, that whole concept of going for drinks after work, they're not really that interested anymore. They want to have fun at work. They want work to be fun, as opposed to, doing fun stuff after work. And continuous feedback. I really like this graphic here. People are our greatest asset, blah, blah, blah. They're not going to fall for the rhetoric. They want meaningful feedback, instant gratification, and just-in-time feedback. If they're doing something well, tell them at the time. If they need to improve, they're hungry for development, tell them as well. So that informal feedback is so critical. So if I were to leave you with just one key strategy, Generation Y, they want to be heard. They want their voice to be heard in the organisation. And it's that face-to-face time. Spend time with them, invest energy and resources, and listen to them so they feel empowered. And the good news, Generation Y are the most high-maintenance workforce in the history of the world. But the good news is they are also going to be the most high-performing. So thank you very much for your time.